The tears streamed down Naomi Jenkins's face as she knelt in the hard wooden pew, her shoulders shaking with sobs that echoed through the small church in Willow Creek, Colorado. It was 1875, and the townsfolk who had gathered for Sunday service shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging worried glances as Reverend Michaels paused his sermon, clearly unsure how to proceed with the distraught young woman disrupting his carefully prepared words about strength in times of hardship. "She's gone mad with grief," whispered Eleanor Thompson, the milliner's wife, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Poor thing hasn't been right since she buried her father. Someone ought to take her home," muttered Bartholomew Green, the town banker, his face pinched with disapproval. "This is hardly appropriate behavior in the Lord's house." The whispers grew, spreading through the congregation like wildfire, harsh judgments and pitying glances directed at the 22-year-old woman who seemed oblivious to everything but her own pain. Her once vibrant copper hair hung limp around her tear-stained face, her black mourning dress a stark contrast against her pale skin. It was then that the church door creaked open, allowing a shaft of bright sunlight to cut through the dim interior. The tall figure of a man appeared in silhouette, his wide-brimmed hat in his hands and trail dust still clinging to his denim pants and worn boots. Hunter Ingram had just ridden into town after 3 months on a cattle drive, unaware of the scene he was walking into. As whispers turned to murmurs of discontent, Hunter took in the situation with a quick glance. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor as he approached the pew where Naomi knelt. "She's grieving," he said, his deep voice carrying across the church. "Let her be." The conviction in his voice silenced the murmurs instantly. He hadn't raised his voice, but something in his tone made it clear he would brook no argument. Hunter turned toward Naomi, crouching beside her pew. "Miss," he said softly, "would you like to step outside for some air?" Naomi looked up, her tear-filled eyes meeting his for the first time, deep brown eyes that held no judgment, only compassion. She nodded almost imperceptibly and allowed him to help her to her feet. Together they walked down the aisle, past the staring faces of the congregation, and out into the bright Colorado sunshine. Neither of them could have known in that moment how their lives had just irrevocably changed, or that the path from grief to healing would lead them through danger, discovery, and a love that would challenge the very foundations of Willow Creek. Once outside, Hunter guided Naomi to a wooden bench beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree. The church bell tower cast a long shadow across the dusty street as they sat in silence for several minutes, Naomi's breathing gradually steadying. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "I don't even know you." "Hunter Ingram," he said simply, offering his hand. "Just rode in from Dodge with a cattle outfit, Naomi Jenkins." She placed her small hand in his weathered one for just a moment. "You must think I think you're someone who's hurting," he interrupted gently. "And I know something about that." She studied him for the first time, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his faded blue shirt. His face was tanned from the sun, with laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. He couldn't be much older than her own 22 years, perhaps 26 or 27, but there was a quiet assurance about him that spoke of experiences beyond his years. "It's my father," Naomi said, her hands twisting in her lap. "He died 3 weeks ago. Fever took him so quickly." Her voice broke. "Everyone keeps saying I need to be strong, that life goes on. Reverend Michaels's sermon today about finding strength." She shook her head. "I just couldn't bear it anymore." Hunter nodded. "Folks mean well, but they forget that grief needs its time." From inside the church came the sound of singing as the service continued without them. Naomi wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "I should go home. I've disrupted enough for one day." "May I walk with you?" Hunter asked. When she looked surprised, he added, I've been traveling 3 months with nothing but cows and cowboys for company. Might be nice to talk with someone who doesn't spit tobacco and curse with every other word. This brought a small, unexpected smile to Naomi's face. I live at the edge of town by the creek. It's not a short walk. Even better, Hunter said, standing and offering his arm. My legs could use the stretch after so long in the saddle. As they walked through Willow Creek, Naomi became uncomfortably aware of the curious stares from shopkeepers and passers-by. The town wasn't large, perhaps 500 souls, and news traveled fast. They already think I'm unstable, she said quietly. Now they'll have something new to gossip about. Hunter shrugged. Let them talk. Gives them something to do between church and supper. The casual way he dismissed their judgment eased something in Naomi's chest. They continued walking, leaving the main street behind as they followed a winding dirt path toward a cluster of cottonwoods that marked the creek. You said you just rode in, Naomi said after a while. Do you have people here in Willow Creek? Hunter shook his head. No family, if that's what you're asking. I'm with the Bar None outfit. We delivered 3,000 head to the railroad in Dodge, and now I'm helping bring some breeding stock back to the ranch south of here. He paused. We're laying over a few days so the men can blow off some steam before heading back. And you? Naomi asked. No steam to blow off. A smile touched his lips. Maybe I'm finding better ways to spend my time. They reached a small, neat cabin nestled among the trees, with a vegetable garden to one side and a chicken coop to the other. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the stone chimney. This is me, Naomi said, stopping at the gate in the split-rail fence. My father built it when we came west 5 years ago. He was a carpenter by trade. She looked at the cabin with a mixture of love and sorrow. It's mine now, just mine. It's a fine place, Hunter said sincerely, peaceful. An awkward silence fell between them, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Would you like some coffee? Naomi asked suddenly, surprising herself with the invitation. It's the least I can offer after your kindness. Hunter's face brightened. I've been dreaming of real coffee for months. Trail coffee's little more than boiled mud. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, with handcrafted furniture that spoke of her father's skill. Naomi busied herself at the iron stove while Hunter respectfully removed his hat and sat at the kitchen table. You said you came west 5 years ago, Hunter said. From where? Boston, Naomi replied, measuring coffee into the pot. After my mother died, father couldn't bear to stay. He said the West would give us a fresh start. She paused, remembering. He was right in many ways. He found purpose here, building half the structures in town, and I found a kind of peace I never had in the city. And now, Hunter asked gently. Naomi turned to face him, coffee pot in hand. Now I'm not sure what comes next. Father left me the cabin and enough savings to last a while, but... She set the pot on the stove with a small clatter. Everyone expects me to sell up and either marry or move back east to my mother's family, as if I can't possibly manage on my own. Can you? Hunter asked, not challenging but curious. I can, Naomi said with unexpected firmness. I've been keeping the books for half the businesses in town for 3 years now. I speak with the bank about investments. I grow most of my own food. She gestured to the cabin around them. This is my home. I won't be pushed out of it by other people's expectations. Hunter nodded, a look of respect crossing his face. Then don't let them push. The coffee began to bubble, filling the cabin with its rich aroma. As Naomi poured 2 cups, she studied the cowboy sitting at her table, a stranger who had shown more understanding in a few minutes than people she'd known for years. Thank you, she said, setting a cup before him, for what you did in church, for walking me home, for listening. Hunter wrapped his hands around the warm cup. Sometimes that's all a person needs, to be heard. They talked as they drank their coffee about Hunter's life on the range, about Naomi's work keeping books for the local businesses, about the changing seasons in Colorado, and the way the aspen leaves would soon turn gold on the mountainsides. Easy conversation that skirted around deeper subjects but brought comfort nonetheless. When Hunter finally stood to leave, the afternoon light was beginning to soften. I should get back to town before my foreman sends out a search party. At the door, he hesitated. I'll be in Willow Creek for 3 more days before we head south. Would it be all right if I called on you again? Naomi felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with grief. I'd like that. Hunter settled his hat on his head and stepped out into the yard. Tomorrow, then. She watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually disappearing down the path, and realized that for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than sorrow. It wasn't happiness, exactly, but perhaps the possibility of it, like the first green shoots after a long winter. The following morning, Naomi awoke to the sound of knocking at her door. Hastily pulling a shawl around her shoulders over her nightgown, she opened it to find Mrs. Winters, the preacher's wife, standing on her porch with a covered basket. "Good morning, dear Mrs. Winters said, her plump face creased with concern. "I brought you some bread and preserves. May I come in?" Naomi hesitated, but her ingrained politeness won out. "Of course, let me just put some water on for tea." Once seated at the table, Mrs. Winters wasted no time getting to her purpose. "The entire town is talking about your display yesterday and your departure with that cowboy. His name is Hunter Ingram," Naomi said, measuring tea leaves with more force than necessary, "and he was kind enough to help me when I was in distress." "Yes, well, Mrs. Winters sniffed. "Kindness from strange men often comes with expectations, dear. A young woman in your position must be careful of her reputation." Naomi set down the teapot with a clank. "My position? You mean as a grieving daughter, or as a woman living alone? Both, dear Mrs. Winters's voice took on a patronizing tone. "Without your father's protection, you are vulnerable. People will talk." "Let them talk," Naomi said, echoing Hunter's words from the day before. "I've done nothing wrong." "Nevertheless, Mrs. Winters continued, undeterred, "Several of us have been discussing your situation. Mrs. Thompson has a cousin in Denver whose family would welcome you as a governess. It would be a respectable position for a woman of your education, and you wouldn't have to bear the burden of this place and its memories." Naomi felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Winters, but I have no intention of leaving my home. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do today." The older woman's lips thinned with disapproval, but she rose to leave. At the door, she turned back. "Just remember, dear, that a woman alone is always subject to gossip, and cowboys aren't known for their permanence." After Mrs. Winters left, Naomi dressed quickly in a simple blue work dress, frustration fueling her movements. She had bookkeeping to do for Mr. Peterson's general store, and decided that immersing herself in numbers and ledgers would be better than sitting at home dwelling on the preacher's wife's insinuations. The walk into town was brisk, the morning air crisp with the promise of autumn. As she passed the saloon, the door swung open and a figure emerged, stumbling slightly. Even from a distance, she recognized Hunter, and her heart sank a little. Had he spent the night drinking? Was Mrs. Winters right about cowboys after all? Hunter looked up and saw her, straightening immediately. He hurried to catch up with her, and as he drew closer, Naomi realized he wasn't drunk at all, just tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Good morning, Miss Jenkins," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Mr. Ingram," she replied coolly. "I see you've been enjoying the saloon's hospitality." He looked confused, then glanced back at the building behind him. "Oh, no, I've been playing poker all night. Some of the boys got into a game with a couple of minors, and I stayed to make sure things didn't get out of hand." He ran a hand through his hair, looking sheepish. "Lost track of time. Was just heading to get some breakfast and then some sleep." Relief washed over her, followed by embarrassment at having jumped to conclusions. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have assumed. No harm done." He fell into step beside her. "Where are you headed so early?" "The general store. I keep Mr. Peterson's books, and it's easier to work there before customers start coming in." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Hunter spoke again. I'm still planning to call on you later if that's all right, after I've had some sleep, despite Mrs. Winters's warnings echoing in her mind. Naomi found herself nodding. I should be home by mid-afternoon. As they reached the general store, Hunter paused. Would it be all right if I brought my horse? I thought perhaps you might enjoy a ride outside of town. The aspen groves up the valley are starting to turn. The thought of escaping the town's scrutiny was suddenly very appealing. I'd like that. I haven't been riding since. Since your father fell ill, Hunter guessed gently. Naomi nodded. Our horses are boarded at the livery. I should let Mr. Collins know I'll be taking Willow out today. I'll take care of it, Hunter offered. What time shall I come by? 3 o'clock. 3 it is. With a tip of his hat, he continued down the street toward the hotel, his stride long and easy despite his obvious fatigue. Watching him go, Naomi felt a strange mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Hunter Ingram was unlike anyone she had met before, straightforward yet gentle, confident without being overbearing, and something about his presence made the weight of grief seem a little less crushing. She turned and entered the general store, pushing thoughts of the cowboy aside as she prepared for a morning of columns and figures. But throughout the day, as she worked through the store's accounts and later tidied her father's workshop behind the cabin, she found herself glancing at the clock more often than usual, counting the hours until 3. When Hunter arrived, precisely on time, Naomi was waiting on the porch. She had changed into her riding clothes, a practical divided skirt and jacket that had raised eyebrows when her father first purchased them for her in Denver, but which she found far more comfortable than riding side saddle in a dress. Hunter led 2 horses, his own dun gelding and Naomi's gray mare, Willow. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her outfit, but he made no comment beyond, "You look ready for a proper ride." Father believed women should be able to ride astride if they chose, she explained, stroking Willow's nose in greeting. He commissioned these clothes from a tailor in Denver who makes outfits for women who work on ranches. Your father sounds like he was an unusual man, Hunter said, helping her mount. He was, Naomi agreed, settling into the saddle with practiced ease. He believed the West offered freedom not just for men, but for women too, freedom from some of the constraints of Eastern society. She gathered the reins. He would have liked you, I think. Hunter smiled as he swung onto his own horse. High praise indeed, shall we? They rode out of town, following a trail that wound up into the foothills. The afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light, and as they climbed, the valley opened up below them. The small town of Willow Creek nestled beside the silver ribbon of the creek that gave it its name. It's beautiful, Hunter said, reining in his horse at a viewpoint. You can see why people choose to put down roots here. Yes, Naomi agreed, her gaze traveling across the familiar landscape, though I sometimes wonder if I stayed for my father's dream rather than my own. And what is your dream? Hunter asked. Naomi considered the question. I'm not sure anymore. When we first came west, I dreamed of adventure, of seeing the mountains and forests, of building something new, and for a while we did. She sighed. But lately it's been more about survival than dreams. Hunter nodded thoughtfully. The first year after my pa died was like that. Just getting through each day seemed like enough. Your father is gone too? Naomi asked softly. 5 years now, Hunter confirmed. He had a small ranch in Texas. When he passed, my brother took over. There wasn't room for both of us, so I started working cattle drives. He shrugged. Been moving ever since. And is that your dream, always moving? Hunter's eyes scanned the horizon. It was, for a time, the freedom of it, seeing new country, meeting different folks. He looked back at her. But lately, I've been thinking there might be something to be said for having a place to return to. Somewhere that's more than just a bedroll under the stars. They rode on, climbing higher into the hills until they reached a grove of aspen trees, their leaves just beginning to turn from green to gold. A small stream tumbled over rocks nearby, the sound of water a soothing counterpoint to the rustle of leaves in the breeze. This is perfect, Naomi said as they dismounted in a small clearing. I'd forgotten how peaceful it is up here. Hunter tethered the horses where they could drink from the stream, then unpacked a small bundle from his saddlebag. I hope you don't mind, I asked the hotel kitchen to put together some food. Thought we might be out long enough to get hungry. They sat on a fallen log beside the stream, sharing bread, cheese, and dried fruit as they talked. Hunter told stories of his travels, cattle towns, and prairie crossings. Storms that scattered herds and nights spent singing to restless cattle. Naomi spoke of her life in Boston before coming west, of her father's determination to build a new life after her mother's death, and of the gradual acceptance they had found in Willow Creek. The town wasn't always kind, she admitted. Father was too educated for some, too Eastern in his ways. And I was too bookish, too outspoken, but he never let me think I should be any different. He sounds like a wise man, Hunter said. He was. Naomi felt tears threatening again but blinked them away. I miss him terribly. Hunter reached out hesitantly, then covered her hand with his. Of course you do. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the play of light through the aspen leaves. Eventually, Hunter cleared his throat. Can I ask you something? About yesterday in the church. Naomi tensed slightly but nodded. What was it about the sermon that broke the dam, if you don't mind telling me? She was quiet for so long that Hunter thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. Reverend Michaels was preaching about how God never gives us more than we can bear. How we must show strength in the face of trials. She shook her head. All I could think was that I didn't want to be strong anymore, that I was tired of bearing it. She looked up at Hunter. Is that terrible, to admit weakness? No, Hunter said firmly. It's honest. And I think God probably values honesty over pretended strength. A smile touched Naomi's lips. That sounds like something my father would say. He always told me that God gave us tears for a reason, and that holding them back was like damming a river eventually. Something has to give. Smart man, Hunter said. My mother used to say something similar. He stood, offering Naomi his hand. Come on, there's something I want to show you before we lose the light. They remounted and rode higher, following a narrow trail that wound through pine trees and rocky outcroppings. When they emerged onto a high meadow, Naomi gasped. Below them, the valley stretched out in a patchwork of golds, greens, and browns, with the distant peaks of the Rockies forming a jagged line against the sky. The setting sun painted everything in rich, warm light, turning the aspen groves to flowing rivers of gold. It's like looking at a painting, Naomi breathed. I found this spot yesterday, Hunter said. Rode up here when I couldn't sleep, thought you might appreciate it. It's magnificent. She turned to him, genuinely moved. Thank you for sharing it with me. As the sun began to dip behind the mountains, they reluctantly turned their horses homeward. The ride back was mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable one, each lost in their own thoughts yet aware of the other's presence. When they reached Naomi's cabin, the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue of the sky. Hunter helped her dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Thank you for today, Naomi said, not immediately stepping away. It was exactly what I needed. For me too, Hunter admitted. In the fading light, his eyes seemed darker, more intense. May I call on you again tomorrow? Yes, Naomi said without hesitation. I'd like that very much. He leaned forward slowly, giving her plenty of time to move away if she wished. When she didn't, he pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. Good night, Naomi, he said softly, using her given name for the first time. Good night, Hunter, she replied, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the day. As she watched him ride away, leading Willow back to the livery, Naomi touched her cheek where he had kissed her. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something stirring within her, not happiness, not yet, but perhaps the promise of it. The following day dawned clear and bright, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approach of autumn. Naomi had arranged to meet Hunter in town for lunch, as she had promised to help Mr. Peterson with a large order arriving from Denver. As she walked toward the general store, she was so lost in thoughts of the previous day's ride that she almost collided with a group of women standing on the boardwalk outside the millinery shop. "Oh, good morning, Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Green," she said, recognizing the banker's wife and the milliner's wife among the group. The women exchanged glances before Mrs. Green spoke. "Good morning, Naomi. We were just discussing the church social next weekend. We hope you'll attend." "Thank you," Naomi said cautiously, aware that something unspoken hung in the air. "I'll certainly consider it." Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat delicately. "We couldn't help but notice that you've been spending time with one of the cowboys passing through, the one from Sunday." Naomi felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Ingram has been kind enough to keep me company, yes." "Dear," Mrs. Green said, her voice dripping with concern, "we understand that grief can make one susceptible to attention from men, but you must consider your reputation." "A young lady entertaining a drifter, Hunter is hardly a drifter," Naomi interrupted, her temper flaring. "He's employed by the Bar Nunn Ranch. As a hired hand," Mrs. Thompson sniffed. "Hardly a position of stability or standing." Naomi drew herself up. "I wasn't aware that a man's worth was measured only by his bank account, Mrs. Thompson. How disappointing to learn that's the case." The banker's wife flushed. "That is not what I meant, and you know it. We are concerned for you, Naomi. Your father would want you to make prudent choices." "My father," Naomi said carefully, "raised me to judge people by their character, not their occupation or their wallet. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm expected at the general store." She walked away, her back straight despite the anger and hurt churning inside her. The nerve of these women, to speak of her father as if they knew what he would want. And to dismiss Hunter so easily, without knowing anything about him beyond his occupation. By the time she reached the general store, Naomi had composed herself enough to greet Mr. Peterson with a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everything all right, Miss Jenkins?" the older man asked, peering at her over his spectacles. "Just a trying encounter with the town's self-appointed guardians of propriety," Naomi said, hanging her shawl on a peg. "Nothing to concern yourself with," Mr. Peterson chuckled. "Ah, the ladies' committee. Been giving you their opinions on that young cowboy, have they?" Naomi sighed. "News travels fast in Willow Creek." "That it does," the shopkeeper agreed. "But if it's worth anything to you, your father always said the best way to judge a man was to see how he treats those who can do nothing for him." He adjusted his spectacles. "And from what I hear, that young man treated you with nothing but respect when you were at your lowest." Naomi felt a rush of gratitude for the old shopkeeper's unexpected support. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson." They spent the morning unpacking and inventorying the shipment from Denver, everything from bolts of fabric to canned goods, tools, and medicines. Naomi was carefully recording each item in the ledger when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see Hunter entering the store, hat in hand. "Good afternoon, sir," he said to Mr. Peterson. "Madam," he nodded to Naomi, a twinkle in his eye at the formality. "What can I do for you, young man?" Mr. Peterson asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "I'm in need of a few supplies," Hunter said, producing a list. "And I was hoping Miss Jenkins might be free for that lunch we discussed." Mr. Peterson glanced at the clock. "We're about done here, I reckon. You've been a great help today, Miss Jenkins. Why don't you go on ahead? I can finish up." "Are you certain?" Naomi asked. The shopkeeper nodded. "Go on, enjoy the fine weather while it lasts." Outside, Hunter offered Naomi his arm. "I thought we might try the hotel dining room. I hear they serve a decent meal." As they walked, Naomi was acutely aware of the glances they received, some curious, some disapproving. "I should warn you," she said quietly, "that our friendship is causing quite a stir in certain quarters." Hunter's expression darkened slightly. "Someone bothering you, just the usual small-town gossip," Naomi assured him. "Concerns about my reputation and your lack of prospects." To her surprise, Hunter chuckled. "Well, they're not wrong about the prospects part. A cowboy's wages don't amount to much." That doesn't matter to me, Naomi said, then blushed at how her words might be interpreted. Hunter's eyes softened as he looked down at her. Good to know. The hotel dining room was quiet, with only a few tables occupied. The waiter led them to a corner table by the window, where they could observe the comings and goings on the main street while maintaining some privacy. After they had ordered beef stew for Hunter, chicken and dumplings for Naomi, she found herself studying him across the table. In the clear light of day, she could see the fine lines around his eyes from years squinting in the sun, a small scar on his chin, and the way his dark hair curled at the temples when not hidden beneath his hat. "You're looking at me mighty hard," Hunter observed, amusement in his voice. "Do I have dirt on my face?" Naomi smiled, a little embarrassed at being caught staring. "No, I was just thinking that I know very little about you, really. Beyond your work and that you're from Texas originally." "What would you like to know?" Hunter asked, settling back in his chair. "Everything," Naomi said impulsively, then added more practically. "For instance, you mentioned a brother. Do you have other family?" "Just Thomas, my older brother. He has the family ranch now with his wife and their 3 children." A fond smile crossed Hunter's face. "Good people, all of them. I try to get back for a visit every couple of years." "And your mother?" Naomi asked gently. "Passed when I was 16. Consumption." Hunter's expression grew somber. "She was a fine woman, strong, smart kind, taught school before she married Pa." "I'm sorry," Naomi said, understanding all too well the pain of such a loss. "My mother died when I was 17. Heart failure, the doctors said, but I think it was grief as much as anything. She lost 2 babies before me and another after. Each one took a piece of her heart, I think." Their food arrived, temporarily halting the conversation. As they ate, Hunter steered the talk to lighter subjects, books they had read, surprisingly many in Hunter's case, as he carried a volume or 2 in his saddlebags on every drive, places they had seen and dreams they had harbored as children. "I wanted to be an explorer," Naomi confessed. "To discover new lands and map them, like Lewis and Clark." "And instead you map numbers and accounts," Hunter observed. "I suppose I do," Naomi agreed, surprised by the parallel she had never considered. "Though it's not quite the adventure I imagined." "What about now?" Hunter asked. "If you could do anything, go anywhere, what would you choose?" Naomi considered the question seriously. "I think I'd like to see more of this country. The mountains and deserts, the Great Plains. Father always promised we'd travel once he'd saved enough, but then—" She trailed off, the familiar ache of loss returning. "I understand," Hunter said. He hesitated, then reached across the table to take her hand. "Listen, Naomi. I know we've only known each other a few days, but I feel—" He was interrupted by a commotion from the street shouts and the sound of running feet. They both turned to look out the window as a man burst into the dining room, his face flushed with excitement. "Fire!" he shouted. "Fire at the livery stable." Hunter was on his feet instantly, all thoughts of their conversation forgotten. Naomi followed him outside, where they could see smoke billowing from the direction of the livery at the edge of town. People were running toward it, carrying buckets and shouting for the volunteer fire brigade. "The horses," Naomi gasped, thinking of Willow and the other animals stabled there. Without a word, Hunter broke into a run, Naomi lifting her skirts to follow. As they neared the livery, they could see flames licking at the roof of the wooden structure. Men were already forming a bucket line from the water trough to the building, while others were trying to lead frightened horses from the burning stable. Hunter didn't hesitate, plunging into the smoke-filled building. Naomi's heart lurched with fear for him, but she focused on catching the reins of a panicked bay that had bolted from the stable, calming it with soothing words before handing it off to a young boy. Minutes stretched like hours as the bucket line worked feverishly to douse the flames. Naomi helped where she could, leading horses to safety and fetching fresh water. All the while, she watched the stable entrance, waiting for Hunter to emerge. When he finally staggered out, leading 2 horses and with a third following close behind, his face was streaked with soot and he was coughing violently. Naomi ran to him, taking the reins from his hands. "Are you all right?" she asked anxiously. He nodded, still coughing too hard to speak. Once the horses were secured, Naomi led Hunter to a rain barrel on the side of a nearby building. He plunged his head into the cool water, emerging with a gasp and shaking water from his hair like a dog. "Better," he managed, voice hoarse from smoke. "Had to get to the back stalls." "Your Willow was there." Naomi realized with a start that one of the horses he had led out was indeed her gray mare. "You went back for my horse," Hunter shrugged as if it were nothing. "Couldn't leave her." Before she could respond, a shout went up from the stable. Part of the roof had collapsed, sending sparks shooting into the air. The fire brigade redoubled their efforts, and gradually, over the next hour, they managed to bring the blaze under control. By the time it was fully extinguished, the stable was heavily damaged, but still standing, and miraculously, all the horses had been saved. Mr. Collins, the livery owner, was beside himself with relief and gratitude. "Don't know what I would have done without you folks," he kept saying, shaking hands with the soot-streaked men who had fought the fire. When he reached Hunter, his grip tightened. "You, Cowboy, you saved those last 3 horses when I thought they were goners. Anything you need, anything at all, you just ask." Hunter, exhausted and still coughing occasionally, simply nodded as the crowd began to disperse, with the horses being temporarily housed in various barns and corrals around town. Naomi noticed Hunter swaying slightly on his feet. "You need rest," she said firmly, "and probably a doctor to check those lungs." "I'm fine," Hunter insisted, though he didn't resist when she took his arm and steered him toward her cabin. "You're not," Naomi said. "You've inhaled a lot of smoke. My father had a remedy for that pine tea with honey, and you need to clean up." By the time they reached her cabin, Hunter's coughing had worsened, and he was wheezing slightly with each breath. Naomi sat him down at the kitchen table while she quickly built up the fire in the stove and put a kettle on to boil. "Take off that shirt," she instructed, her concern overriding any sense of impropriety. "It's filthy with smoke, and it can't be helping you breathe." Hunter complied, though his usual grace was hampered by exhaustion. Naomi tried not to stare at his bare chest and shoulders tanned, muscled, and now smudged with soot as she gathered clean cloths and a basin of water. "Here," she said, placing them before him. "Clean up while I make the tea." As she measured dried pine needles into a pot and added honey from her stores, Naomi found her hands trembling slightly. The thought of what might have happened, of Hunter running into that burning building without hesitation, made her feel light-headed with retroactive fear. When the tea was ready, she poured a cup and brought it to Hunter, who had managed to wash most of the soot from his face and upper body. His shirt lay in a dirty heap on the floor. "Drink this," she said, pressing the cup into his hands. "All of it." Hunter took a cautious sip and grimaced at the bitter, resinous taste. "This is supposed to help." "It will," Naomi assured him. "Father swore by it when the sawmill caught fire 2 years ago and half the men in town had smoke in their lungs." Hunter dutifully drank the tea while Naomi fussed around the cabin, bringing him a blanket and stoking the fire. When he had finished, she took the cup and set it aside, then knelt in front of him, studying his face with concern. "How do you feel now?" "Better," he admitted. The wheezing had indeed subsided, though he still coughed occasionally. "Thank you." Their eyes met and held, and suddenly Naomi was acutely aware of their proximity, of his state of undress, of the fact that they were alone in her cabin with night falling outside. She should stand, step back, maintain a proper distance. Instead, she found herself reaching up to brush a lock of damp hair from his forehead. Hunter caught her hand, his fingers curling around hers. "Naomi," he said softly, her name almost a question. She wasn't sure who moved first, perhaps they both did, but suddenly his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then with growing urgency. His hand cradled her cheek, then slid into her hair, loosening pins until it fell around her shoulders. She felt herself responding with a passion that surprised her, her arms winding around his neck, drawing him closer, when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and not from smoke inhalation. Hunter rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I didn't come here for this," he said quietly. "You know that, right?" Naomi nodded. "I know." He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "I care for you, Naomi, more than I should after so short a time." "I care for you too," she whispered. Hunter sighed, a sound of both contentment and regret, "which makes what I have to tell you all the harder." He took both her hands in his. "The fire delayed us, but my outfit is still leaving tomorrow. The boss wants to get the breeding stock back to the ranch before the first snow." Naomi felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. "Tomorrow, but that's so soon." "I know." Hunter's thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. "I've been trying all day to find the right words to tell you." At lunch, Naomi realized, before we were interrupted. Hunter nodded. "I was going to ask if I could write to you, if you might consider waiting to see if whatever this is between us might grow into something more." Naomi felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "How long would you be gone? A month, maybe 2. "Depends on the weather and how long the boss needs me at the ranch." He hesitated. "But I've been thinking, the bar none needs a bookkeeper. Old Jenkins, no relation to you, I assume is getting too rheumatic to hold a pen. The boss mentioned it on the drive up." Naomi's mind raced. "Are you suggesting nothing improper?" Hunter said quickly. "There's a cabin that was built for the last foreman before he moved on. It's sitting empty. You could have your privacy, your independence, but we'd be near enough to see where this leads." It was a radical proposition, a respectable young woman moving to a cattle ranch on the strength of a few days' acquaintance, and yet Naomi couldn't immediately dismiss it. "I would need time," she said slowly. "Time to consider, to make arrangements if I decided to come." Hunter nodded. "Of course." "I'm not asking for an answer tonight." He squeezed her hands. "Just tell me you'll think about it, and that you'll let me write to you regardless." "I'll think about it," Naomi promised. "And yes, I'd like it very much if you wrote." Relief washed over Hunter's face. He leaned forward and kissed her again, more gently this time. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "It's getting late, and there's still the matter of your reputation to consider." Naomi laughed softly. "I think that ship may have sailed, given the number of people who saw us leave town together after the fire." "All the more reason for me to behave as a gentleman now," Hunter said, though he made no immediate move to leave. They stayed like that for a long moment, hands clasped, foreheads touching, each committing the other's face to memory. Finally, Hunter stood, retrieving his soiled shirt and pulling it on with a grimace. "What time do you leave tomorrow?" Naomi asked as she walked him to the door. "Dawn," Hunter said. "We're already behind schedule." Naomi nodded, fighting back a fresh wave of sadness. "Then I'll be at the livery to see you off." "You don't have to, I want to," she insisted. "Please." Hunter studied her face, then nodded. "Until tomorrow, then." He kissed her once more, briefly, before stepping out into the night. Naomi watched from the doorway until his figure disappeared into the darkness, then closed the door and leaned against it, her emotions a tangle of joy, sorrow, and uncertainty. Tomorrow, she would watch him ride away. And then she would have to decide what came next. Dawn broke clear and cold, with frost silvering the grass along the creek. Naomi had slept little, her mind too full of thoughts and possibilities. She dressed carefully in her warmest shawl over a simple brown dress, braided her hair, and set out for town while the eastern sky was still more gray than blue. The livery stable was a sorry sight in the early light roof partially collapsed, walls blackened by smoke. But the yard was alive with activity as the bar none outfit prepared for departure. Horses stamped and snorted, their breath forming clouds in the chilly air. Cowboys called to each other as they secured packs and checked saddles. Naomi spotted Hunter immediately, tall and straight-backed as he tightened the cinch on his dun gelding. He looked up as if sensing her presence, and a smile broke across his face. He handed the reins to a nearby cowboy and walked over to meet her. "You came," he said softly. "I said I would." Naomi tried to smile, but found it difficult with the lump in her throat. Hunter took her hands, unmindful of the curious glances from his fellow cowboys. "I've been thinking about what I said last night, about writing to you, about the job at the ranch." He took a deep breath. "It wasn't fair of me to suggest such a thing and then ride away, leaving you to face the town's gossip alone." "Hunter, no, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I care about you, Naomi, more than I can rightly explain after so short a time, and because I care, I want to do this properly." To Naomi's astonishment, Hunter dropped to one knee right there in the livery yard, still holding her hands. The activity around them stuttered to a halt as cowboys paused to watch. "Naomi Jenkins," Hunter said, his voice steady despite the public nature of the moment, "I know we've known each other less than a week. I know it's too soon and probably too foolish to speak of love." His eyes held hers, sincere and unwavering, "but I know what I feel in my heart. I know that meeting you has changed something in me, awakened something I didn't know was sleeping." Naomi felt tears gathering in her eyes, but they were different from the tears she had shed in church. These were warm, almost sweet. "I'm asking you to consider becoming my wife," Hunter continued. "Not right away. Take the time you need. Let me write to you, court you properly from a distance, and when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll come back for you." A murmur ran through the watching cowboys, followed by a few whoops and whistles that were quickly silenced by sharp glances. Naomi was speechless, her mind whirling with the unexpectedness of it all. Here was a man she had known for mere days, offering her a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Was it madness to even consider it? And yet, in her heart, there was a certainty that defied logic, a recognition of something true and vital in the connection they shared. "Hunter," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "I can't give you an answer now. It's too soon, too sudden." "I know," he said, still kneeling. "I'm not asking for an answer today, only for the promise that you'll consider it, that you'll let me prove myself worthy through my letters, through my actions when I return." Naomi took a deep breath. "I will consider it," she said, "and I will welcome your letters." A smile broke across Hunter's face like sunrise. He stood, lifting her hands to his lips and kissing them both. "That's all I ask." From across the yard came a shout. "Ingram, time to move out." Hunter nodded without looking away from Naomi. "I have to go." "I know," she said, forcing strength into her voice. "Be safe." "I will." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small carved wooden heart, offering it to her. "Made this last night, not much of a ring, but—" Naomi took the heart, feeling the smoothness of the wood against her palm, the careful workmanship evident in every detail. "It's beautiful." Hunter leaned forward and kissed her once more, briefly but with a promise that made her breath catch. Then he turned and strode back to his horse, swinging into the saddle with the easy grace she had come to admire. The bar none outfit moved out in a cloud of dust and jingling tack, cowboys tipping their hats to Naomi as they passed. Hunter was among the last to ride out, turning in his saddle to look back at her. Their eyes met across the growing distance, and he raised his hand in farewell. Naomi stood watching until the riders disappeared around a bend in the road, the carved wooden heart clutched tightly in her hand. Only then did she become aware of the townspeople who had gathered to watch the departure and the spectacle of Hunter's public proposal. Among them stood Mrs. Winters and Mrs. Thompson, their expressions a mixture of shock and calculation. Before they could approach her, Naomi felt a presence at her side and turned to find Mr. Peterson. "Well now," the shopkeeper said, his eyes twinkling behind his spectacles, "that was quite a send-off, Miss Jenkins." "It was. Unexpected," Naomi admitted. "The best things often are." Mr. Peterson offered his arm. "May I walk you back to town? I believe there may be some conversations awaiting you." Naomi slipped the wooden heart into her pocket and took the old man's arm gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I believe you're right." As they walked back toward town, Naomi was aware of the curious glances and whispers that followed them. But for the first time since her father's death, she found she didn't much care what the town thought. Her mind was already racing ahead, considering possibilities she hadn't dared to contemplate just days ago. A new beginning. A life beyond the boundaries of Willow Creek. And most importantly, a chance at a love that had arrived unexpectedly but had already taken root in her heart. The weeks that followed Hunter's departure were a strange mixture of tedium and anticipation for Naomi. She continued her bookkeeping work and tended to her garden as the first frosts of autumn turned to the deeper cold of approaching winter. But always, her thoughts returned to the cowboy who had ridden into her life and then out again, leaving her with nothing but promises and a carved wooden heart. Hunter's first letter arrived 3 weeks after he left, carried by a male rider making his rounds through the scattered settlements. Naomi's hands trembled as she broke the seal, half afraid that the connection she had felt would not translate to the written word. She need not have worried. Hunter wrote as he spoke directly, honestly, with flashes of humor and unexpected poetry. He described the journey back to the Bar None, the beauty of the mountain passes they traversed, the breeding stock safely delivered. He wrote of conversations with the ranch owner about the need for a bookkeeper, confirming that the position was hers if she wanted it. And he wrote of his feelings for her, not flowery declarations, but simple truths that resonated with her own heart. "I find myself looking east each morning," he wrote near the end, "knowing you're there, beyond the mountains. It's a strange thing to miss someone I've known so briefly, and yet I do." Deeply, Naomi read the letter a dozen times before sitting down to compose her reply. She wrote of the aftermath of his proposal, how the town had buzzed with gossip for days, how opinions had ranged from scandalized Mrs. Winters to romantically supportive, surprisingly Mrs. Thompson, once she learned of Hunter's connection to the prestigious Bar None Ranch. She wrote of her daily life, of the changes autumn was bringing to the valley, of her thoughts and fears about possibly leaving the only home she had known in the West. And she wrote, cautiously, of her growing certainty that what she felt for him was real, despite the brevity of their acquaintance. "I carry your wooden heart with me always," she concluded. "It reminds me that some things once carved endure." Thus began a correspondence that sustained them both through the deepening winter. Hunter wrote every week, his letters becoming more open, more certain of his feelings with each passing page. Naomi replied just as faithfully, finding in the written word a freedom to express thoughts she might have hesitated to voice in person. December brought heavy snow to Willow Creek, cutting off the town from regular mail delivery for nearly 2 weeks. When the route finally reopened, Naomi received 3 letters at once, the last containing news that set her heart racing. "The owner has agreed to let me come for you," Hunter wrote. "If you're willing, if you've decided, I'll arrive in Willow Creek on the 20th of December, weather permitting. We could be married there or wait until we return to the ranch. It's your decision, Naomi. All of it is your decision." Naomi sat by her fire that night, the letter in one hand and the wooden heart in the other, facing the choice that would determine the course of her life. The cabin around her was full of memories, her father's tools still hanging on the wall, the furniture he had crafted with his own hands, the garden they had planted together. Could she leave it all behind for a man she had known for mere days, however deeply she felt for him? And yet, as she looked around, she realized that what had once been a haven had become, in subtle ways, a prison. The town's expectations, the limited possibilities for her future here, the weight of grief that still lingered in the corners, all of it held her in place, preventing her from moving forward. With sudden clarity, Naomi knew what her answer would be. She took out paper and pen and began to write, her decision crystallizing with each word. December 20th dawned bright and cold, the snow-covered landscape glittering in the winter sunshine. Naomi had been awake since before dawn, alternating between nervous energy and calm certainty. She had packed most of her belongings, her clothes, her books, her mother's silver hairbrush, and her father's favorite tools. The furniture would remain, along with the cabin itself. She had arranged to rent it to a young couple newly arrived in town. She dressed with care in her best dress dark green wool that brought out the copper highlights in her hair. Around her neck, she wore a simple chain from which hung the wooden heart, now polished to a soft glow from constant handling. The sound of hoofbeats outside sent her heart racing. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door to find Hunter dismounting from his horse, his tall figure unmistakable despite the heavy coat and hat he wore against the cold. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the reality of his presence after so many weeks of absence almost overwhelming. Then Hunter crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and gathered her into his arms. "You're here," Naomi breathed, her face pressed against the rough wool of his coat. "I'm here," he confirmed, his voice husky with emotion. He pulled back just enough to look into her face. "Have you decided, Naomi? Will you come with me?" In answer, she reached up and drew his head down to hers, kissing him with all the certainty she felt in her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she smiled up at him. "Yes," she said simply, "I will come with you. And yes, I will marry you." The joy that transformed Hunter's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. He lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace, spinning her around as she laughed. "When?" he asked, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "Here in Willow Creek or at the ranch." "Here," Naomi decided. "Tomorrow, if Reverend Michaels is willing. I've already spoken to him about the possibility." Hunter's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You were that certain of your answer?" "I was certain of my heart," Naomi corrected gently. The rest was just details to be worked out. They spent the day making arrangements, visiting Reverend Michaels to confirm the ceremony for the following afternoon, informing the townspeople Naomi had grown close to, and finalizing the rental agreement for her cabin. To Naomi's surprise, the town's reaction to her impending marriage and departure was largely positive. Even Mrs. Winters offered grudging congratulations, though she couldn't resist adding, "It's all very sudden, of course." "Sometimes," Naomi replied with a smile, "the heart knows what it wants before the mind catches up." That evening, they sat together in Naomi's cabin, enjoying what would be one of their last nights in the place that had been her home for 5 years. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light over the half-packed boxes and bare walls. "Any regrets?" Hunter asked softly, his arm around her shoulders. Naomi considered the question honestly. "Not about us," she said, "but yes, some sadness at leaving. This was the last place I shared with my father. Leaving feels a bit like leaving him too." Hunter nodded, understanding in his eyes. "He'll always be a part of you, Naomi. That doesn't change with geography." She leaned her head against his shoulder, grateful for his perception. "Tell me more about the ranch, about our future." Hunter described the bar none, the sprawling main house where the owner lived with his family, the bunkhouse for the Cowboys, the cabin that would be theirs, nestled beside a creek not unlike the one that ran past her current home. He spoke of the work they would each do, of the community they would be part of the life they could build together. "It won't always be easy," he warned. "Ranch life is hard, especially in winter, and I'll still have to go on cattle drives sometimes, though not as often as before." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Naomi said, "and I've lived through Colorado winters before." Hunter smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I know you have, my brave Naomi." They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming until the fire burned low and the hour grew late. Finally, with obvious reluctance, Hunter rose to leave. "I'll stay at the hotel tonight," he said, gathering his coat. "It wouldn't be right to stay," Naomi said impulsively, catching his hand. I mean, we can wait until tomorrow for that, but I don't want to be alone tonight." "Just hold me," Hunter's expression softened. "Are you sure? Your reputation will survive one night of impropriety before becoming a respectable married woman," Naomi finished for him. "Please, Hunter, it's our last night in this house. It feels right that we should spend it together." He studied her face, then nodded. They prepared for bed with a sweet awkwardness, Naomi changing into her nightgown behind a screen, Hunter removing his boots and outer clothes but keeping his undershirt and long johns on. When they finally lay down together on her narrow bed, Hunter's arm around her waist and her back pressed against his chest, Naomi felt a sense of rightness that transcended conventional propriety. "Tomorrow," Hunter whispered against her hair, "you'll be my wife." "And you'll be my husband," Naomi replied, lacing her fingers through his. "It still seems like a dream sometimes." "If it is," Hunter said, "I hope we never wake up." They drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth as the snow began to fall softly outside, covering Willow Creek in a blanket of white. The wedding took place the following afternoon in the same church where they had first met. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, the place where Naomi had been judged for her tears now witnessing her joy. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, attended by those townspeople who had been kind to Naomi during her years in Willow Creek, along with a few of Hunter's fellow cowboys who had ridden up from the ranch to stand with him. Naomi wore a dress of pale blue silk that she had ordered from Denver months ago for Christmas festivities, never imagining she would wear it to her own wedding. Hunter, cleaned up and nervous in a new shirt and string tie, waited for her at the altar with such naked adoration on his face that several of the ladies in attendance were seen to dab at their eyes. As they exchanged their vows, Naomi thought of her father, wishing he could have known Hunter, could have seen her so happy. In her heart, she felt his approval, and perhaps in the shaft of sunlight that suddenly broke through the stained glass to illuminate the altar, there was a sign of his blessing. The wedding feast was held at the hotel dining room, with food and drink flowing freely as the winter afternoon faded into evening. There were toasts and laughter, stories and songs, and through it all, Naomi and Hunter barely let go of each other's hands, as if afraid the other might somehow disappear. When they finally slipped away to the privacy of the hotel's best room, both were flushed with happiness and a touch of nervous anticipation. The door had barely closed behind them when Hunter drew Naomi into his arms, kissing her with a passion that had been building all day. "My wife," he murmured against her lips. "I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Naomi whispered back, her hands moving to the buttons of his shirt. "I'm yours and you're mine from this day forward." Their coming together was everything Naomi had hoped for, tender yet passionate, awkward at moments yet ultimately perfect in its authenticity. Hunter was a gentle and attentive lover, putting her comfort and pleasure above his own, and in his arms Naomi discovered a new dimension of herself, a capacity for joy and abandonment she had never known existed. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Hunter's heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, Naomi felt a deep contentment that went beyond physical satisfaction. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now, naturally. "I think perhaps I have since that first day when you defended me in church." Hunter's arms tightened around her. "I knew I was lost the moment I saw you so beautiful even in your grief, so honest in your pain. I loved your courage then, and I love it now." They slept deeply that night, secure in each other's embrace, and awoke to a world transformed by fresh snow. It was time to leave Willow Creek, to begin their journey to the Bar None and the life that awaited them there. The departure was bittersweet. Naomi took one last walk through her father's cabin, touching the walls he had built, saying a silent goodbye to the home they had shared. Then, with determination, she closed and locked the door, handing the key to the young couple who would now make their own memories within those walls. She and Hunter set out on horseback, he on his dun gelding, she on Willow with their belongings packed on a sturdy mule. The journey would take several days, through mountain passes and valleys, a challenging trek in winter but manageable with caution and good planning. As they rode out of town, Naomi looked back once at the place that had been her home for 5 years. The church steeple rose above the other buildings, the place where her grief had been laid bare and where, just yesterday, her new life had begun. The town had shaped her, challenged her, sometimes wounded her, but ultimately had led her to this moment riding beside the man she loved toward a future full of promise. "Ready?" Hunter asked, noting her backward glance. Naomi turned to him, her heart full. "Ready," she confirmed, and urged Willow forward into the snow-covered landscape, leaving behind the place where she had grieved and found a new beginning. The journey to the Bar Nunn Ranch took 4 days, through breathtaking winter scenery and challenging weather. They spent nights in small-way stations or, when necessary, camping in sheltered spots, wrapped in blankets before a carefully tended fire. Each night in Hunter's arms confirmed for Naomi the rightness of her decision, and each day brought them closer to their new home. On the afternoon of the 4th day, they crested a ridge, and the Bar Nunn spread out below them a sprawling main house. Bunkhouse, barns, and corrals nestled in a valley protected by surrounding hills. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and even from a distance, they could see the activity of a working ranch in progress. "There it is," Hunter said, a note of pride in his voice. "What do you think?" Naomi took in the scene so different from the town she had left behind, yet somehow instantly appealing in its ordered bustle. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. As they rode down into the valley, figures emerged from the buildings to greet them. The ranch owner, a hardy man named Barton Simmons, welcomed them warmly, shaking Hunter's hand and kissing Naomi's cheek as if she were a long-lost relative rather than a new employee's wife. "We've been waiting for you both," he boomed. "Got your cabin all ready, and there's a mountain of bookkeeping that's been piling up since old Jenkins's hands gave out." The cowboys who had attended their wedding cheered when they dismounted, and other ranch hands came forward to be introduced. Naomi was struck by how easily she was accepted, not as an outsider or a curiosity, but as a natural addition to the ranch's extended family. Mrs. Simmons, the owner's wife, took Naomi under her wing immediately. "You must be exhausted, my dear. Come, let me show you to your cabin. The men have kept a fire going all day to warm it for you." The cabin was everything Hunter had described, and more a sturdy 2-room structure with a stone fireplace, solid furniture, and windows that looked out over the creek. Someone had placed a vase of dried wildflowers on the table and hung fresh curtains at the windows. "It's perfect," Naomi whispered, turning to Hunter who had followed them in. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ingram," he said, gathering her into his arms as Mrs. Simmons discreetly withdrew. That night, after a festive welcome dinner at the main house, they returned to their cabin, their home, and christened it with their love, sealing their commitment to this new life and to each other. The years that followed were rich with challenges and joys. Naomi proved to be exactly what the Bar Nunn needed, her bookkeeping skills bringing order to the ranch's finances, and her quick intelligence earning the respect of owner and cowboys alike. Hunter, with his natural leadership abilities and deep knowledge of cattle, rose to become foreman when the previous one retired. They weathered the harsh winters and celebrated the abundant summers. They faced cattle rustlers and drought, market fluctuations, and the inevitable conflicts that arise in any close community. But through it all, their love remained constant, growing deeper and more complex with each passing season. In their 3rd year at the Bar Nunn, Naomi gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Hunter's mother. 2 years later came a son, Daniel, named for Naomi's father. The children grew strong in the clean mountain air, raised with love and laughter, surrounded by the extended family of the ranch. And sometimes, on quiet Sunday mornings when the ranch chapel held its services, Naomi would remember that day in Willow Creek when she had been unable to contain her grief. How strange, she would think, that her darkest moment had led directly to her greatest happiness. How remarkable that Hunter had walked into that church at precisely the right moment, that he had seen her tears not as weakness but as honest emotion deserving of respect. "What are you thinking about?" Hunter would sometimes ask, catching her thoughtful expression. About how we met, Naomi would reply, leaning against his shoulder. About tears in church and a cowboy who understood grief, and Hunter would draw her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Best day of my life, he would say, the day I found you. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, they made a journey back to Willow Creek. The town had grown, with new buildings and new faces, but the church still stood unchanged. They attended a Sunday service, sitting in the same pew where Naomi had once knelt in tears. This time, when emotion overcame her gratitude now, not grief, Hunter's arm around her shoulders was familiar, his whispered words a reminder of all they had built together. It's all right, my love, feel what you feel. And as they left the church, stepping out into the Colorado sunshine with their children beside them, Naomi looked up at the man who had defended her right to grieve all those years ago, the man who had given her the freedom to heal and the courage to love again. Thank you, she said simply. Hunter didn't need to ask what for. He just smiled and took her hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as their lives had woven together, creating a tapestry of love that had begun with tears in a church and a cowboy's simple wisdom. She's grieving. Let her be.